Music City. This week with Bob Mueller.
This week, I'm pleased to be joined by my friend whose resume is too long to go into, John Siegenthaler Sr. The passing of a fighter for civil rights and a journalism giant, John Siegenthaler, dies at the age of 86.
Congress just said no to fixing our broken immigration system.
A showdown between the president and Republicans over thousands of children crossing the border. The governor says he hopes to rekindle talks dealing with Medicaid expansion money in Tennessee.
There's absolutely no question in my mind that the reason that I was being surveilled was because I'm a Muslim.
A new NSA spying scandal.
I've been the hugest LeBron fan. That's all I am, a LeBron fan.
Like LeBron, the Republicans choose Cleveland for their 2016 national convention.
I've been true to the conservative cause, cutting taxes, cutting government, and getting government out of your way.
The views of 63rd District Republican State House member Glenn Cassida, who is facing a primary challenger. And insight from our media and political experts, Jerry Maynard and Chip Saltzman. Hello again and welcome to another edition of This Week. The fight for civil rights and the journalism profession lost a leader this week with the passing of Chairman Emeritus of the Tennessean, John Siegenthaler. More on his life and impact in our This Week cover story. But first, a look at the other political headlines of the week.
This is Dallas. This is where the crisis is unfolding in the Rio Grande Valley. That's about 500 miles away.
The president went to Dallas for political fundraisers. Texas Governor Rick Perry wanted him to go to the southern border to see firsthand the problems of unaccompanied minors illegally crossing.
The president has sent powerful messages time after time by his policies, by nuances, that it is okay to come to the United States and you can come across and you'll be accepted in open arms.
The president asked Congress for $3.7 billion to address the border crisis.
And if you look at the president's request, it's all more about continuing to deal with the problem. We've got to do something about sealing the border and ending this problem.
Congress just said no to fixing our broken immigration system in a way that strengthens our borders and our businesses. These guys still can't get their act together.
Rick Perry may be one of those in Cleveland next year at the Republican National Convention. The RNC chose Cleveland, beating the Democrats, who also had it targeted. Ohio is a swing state after all. 8 cities were in the running, but the choices boiled down to Cleveland and Dallas, with Cleveland coming out on top. According to a new report, 5 prominent Muslim Americans are among 200 U.S. citizens who had their emails collected by the NSA and the FBI over a 6-year period ending in 2008. Faisal Gill served in the Department of Homeland Security in the Bush administration and ran for public office in Virginia as a Republican.
There is absolutely no question in my mind that the reason that I was being surveilled was because I'm a Muslim.
The Obama administration said it's entirely false. The U.S. intelligence agencies spied on political or religious figures because they disagreed with public policy or criticized the U.S. And there must be a court order before any U.S. citizen is targeted for electronic surveillance. Governor Bill Haslam is expressing hope talks could be rekindled regarding his plan for using Medicaid expansion money in Tennessee to purchase health insurance for thousands who don't have it. The governor scheduled a meeting with the new Health and Human Services Secretary, Sylvia Matthews Burwell, hoping something can be worked out. Last year, the governor declined to accept Medicaid money without special arrangements for the state.
This is an important meeting of the governors talking about issues affecting their states.
The National Governors Association brought its summer meeting to Nashville this week, along with security worthy of a presidential visit. And while the president did not attend, Vice President Joe Biden did. The governors shared ideas on a variety of topics, including the Adjutant General's duties.
State emergency duty and security issues, but health, education, welfare, roads, transportation issues. I mean, the governors have a pretty broad gamut.
The high-profile security force included state troopers, Metro Police, K-9 units, and more. Now to our This Week cover story. Tennessee lost a one-of-a-kind this week, a fighter for civil rights, a giant in the field of journalism, and a leader of his state and city. Chairman Emeritus of the Tennessean, John Siegenthaler, died this week at the age of 86. And welcome back to This Week. I'm pleased to be joined by my friend whose resume is too long to go into, John Siegenthaler Sr. Last November, I interviewed John Siegenthaler on the 50th anniversary of John F. Kennedy's assassination. I did not know at the time it would be my final interview with him.
I think any of us who were reporting in Washington at that time saw somebody who was unique.
A few years earlier, I interviewed him on the passing of Ted Kennedy.
And Ted had been hypercritical of President Ford.
To describe John Siegenthaler is to describe a precision timepiece, intricate, precise, exacting, purposeful. Like the makings of an expensive watch, John Siegenthaler was multifaceted. John joined the Tennessean in 1949, resigning in 1960 to act as Robert F. Kennedy's administrative assistant, a stint that included getting beaten during a trip to Alabama with the Freedom Riders. The civil rights movement was in full swing. He returned to the Tennessean as editor in 1962, publisher in 73, chairman in 82, before retiring in 1991 as chairman emeritus. Siegenthaler was also a founding editorial director of USA Today and the founder of the First Amendment Center on the campus of Vanderbilt University. The building where it is housed was renamed the John Siegenthaler Center in 2002. John Siegenthaler was a man of words. He hosted a public affairs show, A Word on Words, for years, dissecting authors and their works. The John Siegenthaler Chair of Excellence was established at MTSU for his lifelong commitment to free expression values. John Siegenthaler was a journalist, a writer, and a prominent defender of the First Amendment. But he was also a citizen of Tennessee and Nashville who loved his city, his state, and was part of the history of both. At one of his last public events last April, with his son John Michael, wife Dolores, and grandson Jack at his side, the Shelby Street Bridge was renamed the John Siegenthaler Pedestrian Bridge, a bridge where, as a young reporter, he talked a man from jumping off into the Cumberland below. He would be happy this photo is one of his last, as it captures his beloved family. Visitation will be from 3 to 6 on Sunday, July the 13th at the First Amendment Center on the Vanderbilt campus. The funeral is 10 a.m. Monday, July the 14th at the Cathedral of the Incarnation. Stay with us. This week continues in a moment. And welcome back to This Week. I'm pleased to be joined by District 63 Republican State Representative Glenn Cassida. Welcome. Always nice to see you, sir.
Thank you. You as well.
Full disclosure, Glenn is in a contested primary with Sherry Hammond. I've known both of them for many years. Sherry will be on the show next week to answer questions. This is your week.
Yes, thank you.
Since 2002, time flies. This will be your 7th term if you win re-election.
Yes.
In that time,
yes,
and we've been talking about this, how Williamson County has grown and changed in just those 12 years.
Yes.
The growth is fantastic, new businesses, new families, growing schools. How has that changed your perspective and how you look at leadership and governing in the county?
And quite a bit. When I first came to the legislature in 2002, it was a Democratic legislature, Democratic governor, Democratic state. And I represented it and always have a Republican county. But the paradigm's been fascinating. It's a different look on the government itself. The Republicans, like myself, believe in cutting taxes, cutting the size of government, and that has proven to be a magnet to bring industry and growth not only to Williamson County, but also to the state of Tennessee.
As you talked about, too, the whole dynamic of the state has flipped over the past 15 years, roughly. Republicans have a supermajority in both houses, both senators, majority of the congressional seats. In Williamson County, majority of the county is Republican like yourself. Has that been a positive? This is a low-income tax, no-income tax state, a low-tax state, a right-to-work state. Do all those things attract industry?
They do, and in the last 2 years, Tennessee and Williamson County has been elected, voted, nominated, acknowledged as the place to retire in the nation, the place to come and open up your new business. And we are deemed by all accounts the lowest tax, most free state in the union. And Williamson County leads that effort. And I'm proud to be from a county that leads the effort and now a state that now leads that effort.
Education is key to Williamson County. A lot of people move there because of the great school system that we have. A lot of businesses come there because of the great schools. They want to raise their kids there. There's a bit of a divide, a bit of conflict going on regarding Common Core. You oppose Common Core.
Yes, I do.
The current director of schools favors part of it, favors some of it, so there's a divide there. Tell me about your opposition.
There are three points, but the most important point that I want to discuss why I oppose Common Core is it is de facto federalization of our education system. Initially, this was an idea that came from the National Governors Association, local control initially, but with the the caving in of No Child Left Behind, the Fed said, okay, states, No Child Left Behind is not working. Come up with something. The national governors came up with something, a standard, if you will. But since that time, the U.S. Department of Education has basically come in and really driving these standards called Common Core, and it has become de facto a federalization of education. And so the states, including Tennessee, was anxious to get out from underneath No Child Left Behind, but the old saying of jumping out of the firing pan into the fire, and I'm afraid that's what we've done in Tennessee.
Now, you supported the governor's proposal when they moved to Race to the Top, which was basically the gateway for what became Common Core.
That's correct.
But did things change that you now oppose Common Core?
Yes, it was simply states in Tennessee. This is how you can get out from underneath No Child Left Behind, adopt new standards, adopt new criteria. And we said we can do that. Well, we didn't realize that what we adopted was going to be Common Core.
Former Governor of Florida, Jeb Bush, was in town, talked to some of you folks, some of your Republican folks, talked just about this. And he said that what states should do is, if you like the standards and agree that standards need to happen, is form Tennessee Core, whatever you want to call it, and create your own standards here in Tennessee. Maybe they're even the same standards, but it's run by the state. Do you agree with that?
I think if long as the state dictates the curriculum, dictates what is learned, I have no problem with that. What I do have a problem with is a uniform set of code and standard across the nation, because the downfall is you have the larger states that we would disagree with, California, New York, driving the curriculum, and that's not good.
Does it cause a divide? Does it make it more difficult for yourself to work with Dr. Looney, who supports Common Core for the Williamson County school system?
You know, you always have disagreements in any level of government, be it with fellow House members from time to time, and so you just have to acknowledge the disagreement and push forward.
Your opponent, Sherry Hammond, is on the school board. She has an education background. She's a CPA. She is new to running for a congressional or a state representative's office. You've got 12 years experience. She says maybe 12 years is enough. Maybe it's time for a fresh look and new voices. How do you respond to that?
You know, a couple of ways. When I had my own business, someone that did well, someone that did what I asked them to do, I would not fire them. I would give them a promotion or a pay raise. And so over the past 12 years, I have risen to third in leadership. I can get things done. But more importantly, I've been true to the conservative cause of cutting taxes, cutting government, and getting government out of your way. So if you like that, you would want to keep that employee that did what you wanted done. And I would submit that's my resume.
As you look towards the next term, if you win re-election, will your goals change? What will you be pursuing as you get ready for the next 2 years?
You will find the Republicans in the House and House leadership working with the members, working towards deletion of the Hall's income tax. You will see us challenge the federal government on this EPA ruling about the carbon and the footprint that we can now have through our TVA power plants. That's got to be stopped. And we will, if we have to, we'll take the federal government to court on that.
And are you worried at all, I would say, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, you're a conservative. Are you worried about a little bit of a divide in the Republican Party where there is a group that is less conservative and more conservative? In Williamson County, there is that divide too.
There is, and that is healthy. I've had several people, oh, it's a shame you're going through the race, and it's a shame, but it's good for the Republic and it's good for the democratic process to have, you know, I'm a conservative. I think my opponent is not. And so we just disagree, and so we put those issues to the voters and let them decide, and that in turn drives the direction of the state.
State Representative Glenn Cassida, excuse me very much. Appreciate your time, and it's always nice to speak with you.
Always nice seeing you too.
Stay with us. This week continues in a moment. And welcome back to This Week. Time now to get the views of our media and political experts, Metro Councilman at Large Jerry Maynard, and the former state chair of the Republican Party, Chip Salzman. Gentlemen, always nice to see you.
Good to see you too.
The immigration fight is ongoing. We're hearing it's kind of here we go again, guys. I mean, let's be honest. The president's saying it's because of a law passed by President Bush. Republicans are saying it's because of the failed policies of the Obama administration. In the meantime, nothing's getting done. We're back where we were again. How do we address this issue?
Well, first of all, we have to see it that this is a humanitarian crisis, and you have parents who are in Guatemala, Honduras, and other countries who are saying my child has an imminent threat to their life. And in Guatemala, I believe it's 1 in 14 chance of being killed. Compare that to New York, where you have a 1 in 25,000 chance of being killed. So parents are saying, let's send our children to a country that we believe are safe. Then you got smugglers who are giving misinformation to those parents, saying that if your children do come, they will not be deported and they can stay. And so we have to do two things. One, we have to realize these are innocent children. And when we deal with our policies, we've got to be compassionate. I know everybody wants to secure the borders, But first, as a Christian, I need to look at the needs of those children and determine that they're safe. And we got to come up with a comprehensive immigration reform to deal with the broader picture. But first of all, let's deal with this crisis of the children first.
You know, it's just more than a humanitarian crisis. It's a legal crisis. It's a constitutional crisis. It's an American crisis. And just having the borders where there are literally thousands of people coming over illegal every day is not any kind of solution. And until we get control of our own borders, nothing else matters, because if you fix it tomorrow, then there's just going to be thousands more the next day. And that's the only thing that matters at this point. Look, I get what's going on in Honduras. It's terrible. But there's children all over the world that are having problems. And we can't take care of everybody. I think at the first we got to secure the border and take care of ourselves first.
At one point it looked like Speaker Boehner wanted to get this moving forward, wanted the GOP to be the leadership on this. Now that's fallen apart a bit. Does someone need to take hold of this issue and solve it? Both parties can benefit.
I think there are opportunities for both parties to benefit from this, but I think more importantly, there's a benefit to the country. But until we stop the problem at the border, we can't control the border, we can't do anything else. And that's the first thing. It's got to be job number one.
Well, I think when you say secure the border, none of the children got in without the security forces knowing about it. So the Border Patrol works. So it's not like they snuck in and we found out they were in California. They came and the border security worked, and they have apprehended them and put them in shelters. The other issue we got to deal with is this, is that the House Republicans have got to decide to put people, immigration reform above politics and partisan politics. You have a Senate passed bill that's bipartisan. They need to take it up, tweak it, do whatever you need to do, send it back to the Senate, come up with a compromise so that the president can sign it.
Good news for folks here in Tennessee who don't have health insurance, as Governor Haslam kind of surprised folks, saying he'd like to rekindle his talk for his third way to kind of use the Medicaid money without expanding it in Tennessee, but use that for uninsured Tennesseans. This has to be a good sign for folks who need that coverage.
Well, and I think where Governor Haslam is today is where he was 6 months ago, 8 months ago, where he's going to do this with conditions. He wants to make sure it makes sense for Tennessee. He wants to make sure it makes sense for Tennessee's budget and for the people that need it here in Tennessee without blowing up the budget.
Well, there's 330,000 people without health insurance that would have coverage if we expanded Medicaid and we opted in. You got 22,000 Nashvillians. Now, this is what this means for General Hospital. General Hospital is struggling financially. However, there are 5,600 patients that are uninsured that would have coverage if we expanded Medicaid. And so, therefore, we would have $11 million in new revenue to General Hospital, which would save the taxpayers dollars. It's a common sense approach. We've lost $3 billion because we did not opt in. Arkansas is doing it. Kentucky's doing it. And guess what? It's working great in Kentucky. Why can't we do it here in Tennessee?
It would be to the benefit of the administration to agree to some kind of guidelines to get people in this state served.
Yeah,
too.
but it's a short-term deal. Remember, that federal money runs out, and the state and the taxpayers will be on the hook 3 years later.
Passing of a political and civil rights giant this week with John Siegenthaler passing away at the age of 86. He's more than a newspaper editor. He was an icon in this city, in this state. Let's talk a little bit about his legacy. I mean, it's so broad. Fight for civil rights, the leader as he was in journalism in this community.
Well, one of the things that we don't talk about a lot is what John meant to the Tennessean. And at one time,
he was the voice.
He was the voice. You had two different newspapers, and one was a little more conservative than the other when it came to civil rights. So when you have a newspaper that supports civil rights, and you have a leader such as John, who is not only saying it with his mouth, but putting it behind the paper. And then one thing that Dwight Lewis and I talked about earlier today is Dwight said that John fought for diversity and promotion at the Tennessean. He made a difference for everyone, whether you were black or white, Hispanic, didn't matter. You had a fair chance to do a quality job, get promoted, provide for your family, because John would not tolerate discrimination.
I think it was real simple. John Siegenthaler was a national leader that never left home. And Nashville was so important to him, not just him as a person, but him and his family. I'm a Father Ryan guy from way back when, and obviously his family was Father Ryan and St. Celia. We went to church at the cathedral. They were very much involved in their church, their community, their city, their state, and their national government, all very seamlessly. And I will say this, nobody really considered John Siegenthaler a Democrat or a Republican. Both sides went to him for advice and counsel because he always gave you that kind of center road opinion, and it always usually was right.
This state has been blessed with some terrific leaders, Estes Kefauver, Howard Baker, Lamar Alexander, and Ned McWhorter. Do you put John Siegenthaler in that list?
Oh, I think absolutely. And even though he wasn't in elective office, he probably had as much to do with the growth of this city as any elected office holder has had in the last 25 years.
Well, the good thing about his legacy is he was on the right side of history when others would not take that stand. And that's one of the things that Dwight and I talked about you know, a lot of people don't remember, John was hit by a pipe on his head that almost cost him his life. This man put his life on the line for what he thought was right. And not many of us have that same courage. And so everything we do for John, such as the renaming of the bridge or the centers, we don't do enough to honor him. But we also honor the legacy of everyone who fought in the civil rights movement. Those names we do know and those names we don't know.
And his community, as we talked about, this community, this city meant an awful lot to him. He was, born here in East Nashville, and this was home to him for all these years. And he was an icon in this community who worked to improve this community with Democrats, with Republicans. Yes, he had a Democratic view in the newspaper, but, he was a supporter of Howard Baker and those folks. He wanted to make it work, didn't he?
Absolutely. It didn't matter if you were a Democrat or Republican from East Nashville or West Nashville. At the end of the day, it's what's best for this community. And he was an icon that has touched thousands of lives his legacy will go on for many, many years.
One of the things I used to love is when you saw him and he spoke with so much passion and it was so real and it wasn't, it was so real. He lived it. He was, and that's why we love him so much, because he's not just an icon, but he's a living testimony of where we come from.
He will be missed. Chip Saltzman, Jerry Maynard, appreciate your time and your insights. Stay with us. This Week continues in a moment. Welcome back. That will do it for another edition of This Week. I want to thank my guest, State Representative Glenn Cassida, Chip Saltzman, and Jerry Maynard. We hope to see you back here next weekend for another edition of This Week, and you have a great week.